Hello, everyone, and welcome to the State of Culture. My name is Adrielle Farr, Director of Art and Cultural Affairs for the City of Kingston. And before we begin, I just wanted to let our interpretation team make a brief statement about how you can access Spanish language needs for the rest of this meeting.
Hola, buenos días. Contamos con interpretación disponible en español. Les pedimos a todos los participantes que hablen en voz alta y clara en sus micrófonos. Para tener acceso a la interpretación, por favor, dale clic al enlace en el chat. Si tiene algún problema, por favor, escriba en el chat. Gracias. Hi, we have interpretation available in Spanish. We ask that all participants speak loud and clear into their microphones. To have access, please click on the Google link in the chat. Thank you. And if you have any problems, please let us know in the chat. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. So before we get started, I would like to pass the mic over to Mayor Steve Noble for some opening remarks.
Good afternoon, Addie. Thank you so much for the opportunity to say hello to everyone today. I want to first thank everyone who is participating today. The state of our culture here in the city of Kingston is strong, but the work that has been done over the last few months has also guided us in a way to let us know that there is still much more work to be done. And the only way for us to be able to do this work is to do it together as a community. And so today is that first step to introduce the community to the wide array of events, meetings, discussions that took place to be able to understand where we are with our arts and culture here in Kingston, and where could we go, and what are some of our options. All of this work has really helped, I think, inform the decisions that we can then make going forward as a city, and has really will become the baseline of all future decision-making when it comes to arts and cultural affairs here in Kingston. And so with that, I do want to just say thank you to our Director of Arts and Cultural Affairs, Adrielle Farr, for her work in this effort. I also want to thank the Kingston Arts Commission, as well as our Project Advisory Committee. And I also would like to spend a moment to just thank Lord for doing work in this really difficult environment. It has not been easy to work with the parameters of COVID, but we've done our best to be able to reach out and make sure that we could communicate with effectively with all of the different organizations here in Kingston. And I do think that what you'll hear today and what you'll learn about today is that this is not the end of our process, but just the beginning of what will be an evolving and exciting process for the Kingston community to go through together. And one thing I will just end on is that none of this would have been possible without significant financial support from the Novo Foundation, who has been a partner here with the City of Kingston in so many different levels. But to be able to recognize how important arts and cultural affairs is not only for the quality of life here in the community, but also for our economic development. We have been and will continue to be a community of makers, and we want to be able to support that community. And by recognizing that it is an opportunity for us to create further jobs and to be able to embolden folks who live here to be able to make a living in arts and cultural activities is really important and a priority for our administration here in Kingston. And so with that, I want to turn it back over to Addie and say, again, I look forward to taking these next steps with all of you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Noble. And once again, thank you to all of you who have joined us today. My name is Adrielle Farr, Director of Art and Cultural Affairs for the City of Kingston. And we are here today for the State of Culture, which is our next exciting step in the Arts and Culture Master Planning process. So we do have an agenda prepared for you today, so please take a moment to take a look over all of the different things we'll be running through today. We do have a lot to go through, but we're very excited, particularly for the breakout discussions that will be coming later. So if you just want to take a moment to look over the agenda. Okay. So once again, my name is Adrielle Farr. I am the Director of Art and Cultural Affairs for the City of Kingston, and I am also the project manager for the Arts and Culture Master Plan. And I also am joined on the city staff side by Ruth Ann Devitt Frank, who is the grants manager for the City of Kingston. Cultural planning is a community-driven process, so we find it really important to make sure we include community members from the start. So we do have a project advisory committee who has been providing guidance to the project, and you can see a list of our project advisory committee participants here. We have a lot of wonderful folks who are connected and dedicated to the arts, so we're very grateful for their input. Luckily, we are also receiving guidance from the Kingston Arts Commission, who is an advisory commission at the City of Kingston, who has monthly meetings that are open to the public that you're all welcome to attend on Thursdays at 4:30 once a month, second Thursday of every month. So the Kingston Arts Commission is also another group of folks who are very much committed to arts and culture in our city, in our communities, and who have helped to create a lot of amazing opportunities in Kingston. So once again, we're here today for the State of Culture, and that is an opportunity for us to be able to share all of the amazing work that we have done with our consultant team, Lord, who's going to give us a walkthrough of all of the work that we've done in the past, and also give us a few understandings of what we're going to be doing moving forward, and to just walk us through all of the exciting things we've discovered as we've been listening to you. So I am going to hand it over to Joy Bailey Bryant, who is the project lead from Lord Cultural Resources.
Thank you so much, Addie. And thank you to Mayor Noble and to Ruth Ann and all of the wonderful and committed Kingston residents who have been shepherding this process over the last few months. We have truly enjoyed working with you and just enjoying the rich arts and cultural environment of Kingston. As Addie said, I am Joy Bailey Bryant, president of Lord Cultural Resources, and I'm joined today by our wonderful team who you will hear from, each one of us, Eve Moros-Ortega, Tiffany Lyons, and John Stover of JS&A, which is our economic development partner in this team. Also, Aaron King as a part of JS&A. We have been working with you for the last few months, as I said, really trying to understand, gaining more information, and just getting our arms around what is happening arts and culture wise in Kingston. This is a 3-phase process for the entire plan. And it started with that needs assessment and public outreach, which we have been doing across the city, and really getting a great taste, as I said, of what is happening in Kingston and how rich and wonderful your arts and cultural resources are. We have taken that information, that data, if you will, and really started to create a cultural asset inventory to understand where there are assets and where there are gaps, where there are needs and where there are opportunities. And at this point, we are really starting to see some things to come together, to come to fruition, coming to some commonalities to emerge. And so we're going to share some of those with you all today in our some of our emerging findings. So you see us here at the pink rectangle on the end, phase 3. So that's why that bubble is there. We are here. This phase 3 process is going to go on for just a little while so that we can test these findings and really start to talk about what we want to do with these findings in that action planning, and moving towards a draft and final cultural plan for the city of Kingston and a presentation of that plan. So we're really hitting exciting times, and we're so excited that you have been able to join us today. So who has participated over these months with the cultural planning process? As Mayor Noble said, and as Addie shared further, we have spent the time engaging with you in various locations, arts and cultural locations and activities. And during this COVID times, you have made the endeavor as Kingston residents to come to cultural planning meetings that have been taking place on Zoom. And some of you have even conducted community circles in safe, COVID safe environments where you are joining with friends and talking about the ways that you are experiencing arts and culture and you want to experience arts and culture. This slide talks just a little bit or shows just a few of the ways that we have been engaging with people. Many of you have taken the survey, which is available online. We've had 5 community workshops on COVID, and we've had over 180 registrations for those. We created that community conversation toolkit, which is a toolkit for you to have these conversations in COVID safe environments together. We visited several locations across Kingston and have done many stakeholder interviews. We also have had what we call piggyback meetings. Piggyback meetings are opportunities to engage with organizations that are not necessarily always thought of as arts and cultural, but are clearly partners. So examples of that are the library, the Board of Education, and the Hudson Valley Arts Meetup. You are a city that plans, and we are a group that is very thankful for that, because that means that we are using information in addition to the information that we are gaining anew through our planning process. We are able to use the information that Kingston has gleaned in many of its planning processes in the past and moving forward. These that you see listed here are just a few of the plans that we are building this cultural plan upon and connecting to. It's super important that you understand that arts and culture is not a silo off to the side. The point of a cultural plan is very much that arts and culture is interwoven throughout the fabric and the makeup of all the sectors of society. So you will see arts and culture throughout the master plan of the city. When we think about educating our population more richly and more fulfilling wise, that you see arts and culture embedded in that work. That when you think about open spaces, making those open spaces more appealing and more attractive to people, arts and culture will be at the table for those in those conversations. Similarly, when we think about all of these planning processes, we're looking to make sure that arts and culture is a part of each one of those. I'm going to take the time now to bring forward my colleague Eve Morris-Ortega to walk us through the key findings from the process that we have gone through the last few months, some of the things that have come up. And if you also, please do pay attention to what's happening in the chat. There are many messages telling you where these slide images are from, as well as answering some of the questions that you may have. Eve, if you'd like to please start with the key findings.
Sure. Thank you, Joy, and thank you, Mayor Noble, Addie, Ruthann, all of you for joining us today. We are so honored to be working with the great city of Kingston. And what we're going to do now is, as Joy said, walk you through some high-level key findings. We really want to make sure we hear from you today. Many of you have been involved in this process throughout all the months we've been working. So some of this should be familiar, and for people who are new, we really want to give you a sense of what rose to the top, the patterns we saw, what we heard from you. So we're going to start with a vision to really encapsulate overall what we heard a vision for culture in Kingston could be. And I am going to read this. So we envision a Kingston that celebrates the diversity of its population, that is its key strength, connects its creative community to allow for deep and sustainable collaboration, leverages its illustrious history as New York State's first capital, while enlightening untold stories about its past and present, employs art and culture to foster greater connectivity geographically and socially, and tells the story of its unique identity, serves as a regional hub for the maker economy to foster jobs, workforce training, and entrepreneurship, and welcomes newcomers while protecting long-term residents to work together and ensure all in Kingston can prosper. So I know that was a lot, and I read that quickly, so I'm not going to read every word on the other slides, but that really couches all that follows, and everything that follows fed that vision. So strengths. As Mayor Noble pointed out, there are so many strengths. And in this presentation, we can't name check all the amazing organizations and artists that we discovered in this work that will be part of the plan and our cultural asset inventory. So please, if you don't see your name today, it will be in there. But highlights of the strengths: the diversity of the population, your historical significance, your location, your landscape, that really strong inventory of existing spaces and businesses and organizations, your entrepreneurial, you have so many artists and makers, a very strong visual arts, music, culinary arts, increasing film and video. The volunteerism is strong, great parks, and a real sense of pride. Also, as Mayor Noble said, there's more to do. And these were the weaknesses and or challenges that we heard in this process. There are divisions and segregation, racial and socioeconomic, geographic, old timers and newcomers. There are fears of gentrification and displacement, and silos and missed opportunities for collaboration. Some organizations talked about being under-resourced, and thus the need for city government to support art and culture more, including clarifying public art, transportation and wayfinding can be improved, access to support and services, branding and marketing, and more LGBTQ venues. So that, again, very high level, but those were some of the things that we heard frequently. And now I'm actually going to turn the mic over to my colleague Tiffany to talk about some high-level findings from the Cultural Participation Survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. Let me just do, perfect. Okay, so first off, thank you all for attending today. This was the survey that we had mentioned a little earlier in regard to how have we been engaging with the community of Kingston. So here we'll have a few high-level insights as to what the responses were. So first on this slide, as you can see, we're going to be giving the high-level insights specifically from the cultural survey. I'm not going to read all of them, but all of our findings and all of the summaries will be available online after this meeting. But I do want to point out some highlights, such as this slide. 3 of Kingston's greatest cultural strengths were reported to us by respondents as parks, visual arts, and music. Next. So looking at this side for the arts and cultural offerings of Kingston, here we see the overall strength of Kingston's art and culture. 71% found that cultural offerings in Kingston were good or excellent. For obstacles, 2 of the most cited are a lack of information or scheduling issues. We also see that an overwhelming amount of respondents strongly agreed that arts and culture improve the quality, livability, image, and identity of their community. It also helps students perform better academically and supports the economy. And we'll have more on that in the economic impact slides coming up after. Next slide. Great. So here we see that most people agree that supporting arts and culture can strengthen social or community connectivity. There are high levels of participation in Kingston. More than half have attended at least 1 to 2 cultural events per month. That's nearly half of the respondents. And half of the respondents themselves identified as creators. Going along with what Mayor Noble said, is you are a community of makers. But as a weakness, 82% recognize that driving to get to events is difficult, and it points to a challenge of accessibility. Next slide. So in terms of where people are experiencing culture in Kingston, the top responses include performance venues, art galleries, community organizations, festivals, historic landmarks, and natural heritage. In terms of which neighborhood people go to experience arts and culture, the 3 main neighborhoods that we heard were Uptown Stockade area, Downtown Waterfront, and Midtown Kingston. Next. And regarding what's missing, in Kingston, as we saw, there are many strengths, and these are points that people pointed out needed a little bit of help. So recognizing that it's the coordination of all of these events and the collective marketing, transportation, flexible community performance venues, affordable rental spaces, more bilingual and culturally diverse offerings, and more LGBTQ events and venues were the most frequently cited. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to John Stover and Associates to talk about the economic impact analysis that they provided for Kingston.
Excellent. Well, it's good to be speaking with you all, and this is a fantastic turnout for Tuesday afternoon. My firm, JS&A, specializes in economic development analysis and strategy, and Mayor Noble really hit the nail on the head when he talked about how the arts is important, not only in terms of culture and community building, which we know, but also it's an important part of the economy and of economic development for the city. And so we conducted an economic impact analysis to really dive deeper into the questions of what is the relationship between arts and culture and Kingston's economy, and how can we share this message and communicate this importance in the language of stakeholders like city officials, like the business community, like the philanthropic community, like folks who really kind of want to know the numbers and quantify in financials. And so in terms of the current landscape and who's here, we conducted a cultural arts inventory and found that there are 218 arts and cultural businesses in the city of Kingston. So from artist studios and practices to art galleries to creative services and art supplies and manufacturing, promotion and events and more. And then in addition, 132 cultural nonprofit organizations and institutions. And so how that stacks up, and I thought this was a really interesting finding. So we said, okay, well, what is the proportion of arts and cultural organizations in Kingston relative to other cities of similar sizes across the state, and then relative to other cities nearby? And what we found is it's really true that there's a large portion and a large clustering of arts and cultural activity in Kingston. You have a greater share of that than a strong majority of your peer cities. And so we dug deeper into, okay, so who is this kind of core constituency of the arts and cultural industry? And we found that, collectively there's 350 arts and culture related establishments, encompassing 845 jobs, over $31 million in wages, and over $72 million in revenue and expenditure every year. But we know that's not the full part of the equation, because the arts have a greater impact than just kind of immediately what folks are doing within arts and culture. Another kind of way to think about the varied impacts is, well, what types of other businesses are supported? So when visitors come to an event, they may be coming from out of town and staying at a hotel. They may be buying gas on the way. They may be stopping at a restaurant on the way. There's many. They may be doing other recreational activities. And so we looked into, and Ulster County has and the region has pretty fantastic data on visitor draw and spending, and we're able to identify that there's an additional $35 million of spending that's related to the arts, but are happening in other industries, kind of ancillary and being supported by Kingston's arts-related activity. But then there's a third cut as well. And here's where things start to get a little bit wonky. But in terms of the economic relationship between arts and culture and that kind of direct spending in other establishments when folks are coming to town for arts-related reasons, well, there's something called indirect impact and induced impact. And indirect impact is the supply chain. So if an artist needs to purchase supplies, a restaurant that somebody goes to after a show, they need to purchase their food. There's so many different related businesses that make that work. And so when you count for industry supply chain, and when you count for induced spending, which is employee wages within the arts, and how are those folks spending money in the local economy, well, that adds an additional 439 jobs, an additional $16 million in wages, and an additional $55 million in revenue. So collectively, when we talk about the direct impact of the arts industry, when we talk about the types of visitors that's bringing and how that's impacting other businesses, and when we're talking about the indirect and induced impacts, that supports a total of 1,500 jobs and 55 million in wages and over $163 million in revenue to the city every single year. And so in terms of the big picture takeaways is this is big. This is a large portion and an outsized proportion relative to many of your peers. It also has a important impact, not only in terms of just the quality of life and supporting the local economy, but this is an important asset for the city proper. So it provides $3.3 million in annual tax revenue to the city of Kingston, and significant revenue also for the county and the state of New York. And so this is something that we now have the data and the proof behind to say, hey, there's a return on investment for the city and other public entities to invest in the arts in town, in addition to nonprofit and private businesses. And in terms of we're about to get into a bunch of recommendations related to this as well, but something that stood out to us as well is because there are a number of folks coming in town, at least in part, and oftentimes exclusively because of arts-related events and activity, strengthening tourism infrastructure could be a helpful driver in terms of helping to encourage this type of visitorship and spending. But the big picture takeaway here, again, is that arts and culture is a fundamental part of the Kingston economy, and it needs to continue to be supported.
Thank you, John. I'm going to talk about emerging opportunities now. And really everything that we have heard so far is leading up to this question of what are the emerging opportunities? And this is really where we want to get you to focus, because our data is to back up what these opportunities are and to think about how these can help Kingston really make the most of that strength that you've got and address the weaknesses. So let's go to the next slide and we'll give you the overview. And these I will read, and we're going to go one by one into each of them a little more deeply. So 1, foster greater collaboration and communication in Kingston's creative economy. 2, become a regional hub for arts and culture and cultural tourism. 3, empower and celebrate diversity and equity in Kingston's arts and cultural sector. 4, leverage maker economy to grow creative workforce training and jobs. 5, improve infrastructure and geographic connectivity. 6, strengthen government support and policy for arts and culture. 7, increase funding and financial support for arts and culture. And lastly, ensure an affordable and accessible space for artists and creatives. And mind you, those are not in order of importance. They're just all 8 of them emerged. So now we're gonna go through each one. We're not gonna read every single word. All of this will be available after, but I do wanna point out, there was a a comment in the chat about how to support mid-career and established artists, and hopefully you'll see that that is a really great point, and that we're going to address that with some of these. So number one, fostering greater collaboration and communication in Kingston's creative community. We've heard this again and again, and there are a number of ways this can happen, and again, building on existing work, whether it's a shared calendar, a shared directory, regular convenings, better connections between the different sectors, you know, the public schools, the higher ed, and all those amazing local artists, whether they're emerging, mid-career, or established, right? Next slide, please. Become a regional hub for arts and culture. So, you know, regional collaborations, there is a history of that. You can build upon this. And a biennial would be, again, a way to think about a bigger project that you could unite the region with Kingston as a hub. So that could also address that comment in the chat about both established, mid-career, and emerging artists. You've got the river as an amazing resource. So, and then turning that into a marketing and branding campaign to really brand Kingston as that regional hub. Next slide, please. Empower and celebrate diversity in Kingston's arts and cultural sector. Really important. This was something we heard a lot, that the diversity is that strength, and that needs to be nurtured and celebrated in the arts and culture economy and community. So whether that's pipelines for more diverse leadership, getting to those stories that are not told as much, and something, you know, providing more Spanish language resources. There's a very large Spanish language population in Kingston. So you can see some other emerging recommendations for this. So that's just a few. And now I am going to have Tiffany go through a few other recommendations. Tiffany, please.
Thank you, Eve. There we go. Click. Perfect. Okay, so this next one is leveraging maker economy to grow creative workforce training and jobs. This is something that we've heard not only in this meeting and previous community workshops, but also we're seeing it in the chat. So it's how do we build upon models such as the Fab Lab, a makerspace, Tech Cities, Stockade Works, Kingston Design Connection, Draw, Hudson Valley Hullabaloo. How do we grow these economies to create a more creative workforce and engaging in the creation of trainings and jobs? So this particular opportunity is looking at how can we acknowledge and foster professional development opportunities for the creative economy. That goes with all of the administrative back end with branding, marketing and PR, financial literacy. And how do we, and this is something that we heard a lot in community workshops, help local creatives with supply chains and purchasing help. Creating the incentives for companies to hire and buy specifically from local creatives. And providing internships and youth and training opportunities like Ulster Youth Build. Connecting with Ulster County's People-Centered Economy Plan, which prioritizes the maker economy, which Kingston very much is. Next. So our next opportunity is in improving infrastructure and the geographic connectivity. As you saw in some of our comments on the strengths and challenges of Kingston, that geographic connectivity is very much top of mind for Kingston residents. So building upon the Midtown Art District and ensuring connection to other key areas of the city, recognizing that we saw this in the survey as well as Uptown Stockade and Rondout are also places that people are going to experience art and culture in Kingston, and how do we get people to these sites? Connecting with a Kingston wayfinding plan to ensure artists are involved in the wayfinding planning and signage to coordinate branding aesthetics and possibilities of having those creatives on these calls and in these meetings to make sure that Kingston art is very much present in the wayfinding plan. Connecting with Kingston Open Spaces, planning to ensure art is included throughout. So making sure that creatives are always in those rooms where these decisions are happening when building out the infrastructure of Kingston. and connecting with transportation. And that connects back to how do we get people to these amazing sites within Kingston that has all of these offerings. And providing creatives and youth access to technology to better build out their creative brands. Next. And strengthen government support and policy for arts and culture. This is integrating art into all city functions, buses, garbage cans, wayfinding, signage, city branding, however we can get the arts of Kingston to be present in everything in the city. This is an opportunity that calls to address zoning and creating policies to prevent the displacement and develop more affordable housing for the Kingston artists that are currently living there and possibly coming in the future. Ensuring that the government understands the true value, and working with JSNA, they have very much put forth an analysis that shows that arts is very integral to the economy of Kingston. And create a city art collection by buying art from local artists. And this goes into developing a percent for art program specifically in Kingston. And with that, I'm going to pass on the remaining opportunities to Joy Bailey Bryant.
Thank you, Tiffany. So an additional, we have 2 more opportunities to talk through, and then we're going to hear from you. So the 7th opportunity is to increase funding and financial support for the arts. Our team has done many cultural plans across the country. And one thing I can say is that by and large, there is no new money. And by that, I mean money that is magically coming into the community to fund all these great opportunities that we are unearthing. Instead, funding for these opportunities comes from pooling of resources, of money that is already present. So I will use the example of in the city of Macon, they were doing, the city Board of Education was doing improvements to many of the schools. And so since some of those were facade improvements, and there were going to be improvements that would be improved by aesthetic opportunities, individual artists were engaged so that they could be a part of the facade improvements that were taking place at many of these schools. This provided jobs for artists, so they were being paid. This provided a richer aesthetic environment for the students in the schools and the neighborhoods in which the schools were located. And they also helped the communities to see the value of the individual artist and the arts in those communities. So by increasing funding and financial support for the arts, we mean finding these types of synergies and opportunities for funding of artists and arts organizations, even in the spaces that the money is currently in these environments. We just have to unearth and kind of find those partnerships. So some of these opportunities you see listed here, and you may have other ideas as well. Our final opportunity is around ensuring affordable and accessible space for artists and creatives. This is something we've heard so much and heard so many ideas around this. We were very excited that you have many artist live workspaces, but there were still some opportunities that we saw were not necessarily being realized and that people saw as opportunities to move forward. So for instance, working with the Kingston Land Bank to create strategies to preserve more affordable spaces. As I said, we did many of these community workshops and visits, and we're all across the city of Kingston, and we found and heard many times that artists and creatives really needed space to both create and affordable space to show and rehearse, for instance, as well as live. So just really creating a space for artists and creatives. is what this opportunity is speaking to. So just to reiterate that we found these 8 opportunities have really come to the fore in our conversations. And this is not to say that these are all of the opportunities. However, these are the ones we can reliably say came up over and over and over and over again through the surveys, the conversations, the visits, the every interaction, the interviews, the plans. These opportunities rose to the surface again and again and again. So in these 8 opportunities, we really think that and see that the arts and culture in Kingston can be connected not only to the arts and cultural sector, but to the other sectors of Kingston across the community. So now we've taken the time, taken a lot of your time to speak about what we found in the process, and now premiering these opportunities. Before we go into our breakout groups, I actually do want to take one moment to allow, well, I'll tell you what this is what we'll do. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen with the breakout groups, and then I would like everyone to pause for a minute because Addie and the translators will make an announcement around how the rooms will work, okay? So just to tell you what we're gonna do with the breakout groups, we are all going to be separated into different groups, which are going to be facilitated by one of the consulting team members. First, the first thing we want you to do when you go into the room is we want you to meet everyone. We want you to introduce yourself very briefly and tell what organization you're representing, especially if you're representing yourself. Then we want to talk about the opportunities. Is anything missing? Are there places where some of these opportunities could be augmented a little bit? Second, which recommendations are most important to you and what can be added? This is super important because the plan has only finite opportunities, right? There's only a finite amount of time and really resources. What is a true priority and what recommendations are really important to you? Be selfish a little bit. Finally, who should be involved and which will you help with? I saw just a moment ago a chat that said Kingston is really good at collaboration. And that is true. We found that across this entire process. So how will you help to make these opportunities real? And which one of those are those, okay? So those are the 3 questions that we want you to address in the breakout rooms. They'll be facilitated by one of the consultant team members. And we'll have about 30 to 40 minutes for that discussion, okay? So before we go into our breakouts, I'm going to bring Addie and or the translators up to talk about how this process is going to work.
Hello, thank you, Joy. And thank you for all of that incredible information. That was so informative, and it's always so wonderful to see folks responding in the chat. So I've been trying to keep up and reply to as many folks as possible. We are going to make our way into breakout groups. So I do just want to let you all know that if you do require Spanish translation needs, we do have a separate breakout group for that. I'm going to place the link in the chat. So if you are looking to have a breakout group where we have Spanish language needs, you would simply click on that link, join that Google Meets group, and then we would do our breakout group over there. So if you have any questions on how that works, please just send a link in the chat. For the rest of you, we are just going to be kind of spirited away into these breakout groups, so you'll just need to kind of hang tight. But again, for those who are seeking Spanish translation services for the breakout groups, please click the link in the chat and follow the instructions from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Addie. So everyone, we are now going to go into our breakout rooms, and we are going to have about 30 minutes in the breakout rooms. until 2:20. We'll come back together then, okay? See you, thank you.
Aaron? You there?
Hey,
Hi, I made you co-host. So you'll be able to see anybody coming into the room. I'm gonna hop into breakout room 4 now.
okay, great.
Hey, Richard. Gloria, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
This is Aaron. I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I don't know how this works. I've never done one of these before.
Oh, so you were assigned. You should have been assigned a waiting room to enter into. Do you see
and-
any? Should have like a notification of some sort. Get on to breakout rooms.
Okay, so wait a minute. Maybe if I go to join. Okay, I think I found it.
Okay, great. anyone has any issues with joining the breakout rooms, let me know.
Duro todo el tiempo sentado. Ay,
Yeah, honey. Whew.
Hi. Guy, you were finishing up talking in my group, but thank you so much for sharing. We appreciated it. Okay, is everyone back from their groups? Tiffany or Eve, you have to tell me.
Yep, I'm looking. I think we have everybody. We're at 63, so we might have a couple more trickling in.
And I think we're going to do the slideshow for just a quick break.
Yes, perfect. Because I was typing frantically. So what we are going to do now is to thank you for being such great participants, as well as the fact that sometimes we just need a little beauty in our lives. We have a wonderful show of artists. We have a wonderful show of artists that we're going to play for you. And before we start that, We're going to let the interpreter, the translator, tell us what is going to happen, and then we'll start the show, okay?
Y hola, este es un recordatorio que hay interpretación al español disponible. Tiene que darle clic al enlace que se va a compartir en el chat. Repito, hay interpretación disponible en español. Va a tener que darle clic en el enlace que se va a compartir en el chat. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. You just feel a breath of fresh air. So now we are going to, if you could stop share on that. Thank you so much for that wonderful slideshow. We are now going to do our report backs in a fairly standard way. I'm not going to mix it up. We're going to go from groups 1 and proceed forward in numerical order, okay? So the reporter for group 1, I don't know what group that was. Whose group was group 1?
I don't know.
Eve's group. John is 2nd, Joy, you're 3, and Tiffany's 4 on 4.
Perfect. Okay. So the reporter for Eve's group, if you'll go next.
That's going to be Anne. And Anne, I am going to share my screen. I didn't fully get to clean it up, but hopefully it will be clear enough. So let me go ahead and share my screen right now. We had a very rich discussion, which you'll be able to see by the amount of writing. But and what I've done is I've bolded the questions and then some of the key points.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Eve. Yeah, we had a really great conversation, and in the session we started with, as all of you did, is anything missing? And I think some of the things that came up, the Arts Center, we'd like to have a central place or a focal point for the arts. There's so many artists in our city. We talked about how wonderful it would be to have a place where we could experience art together. History, Lynn Woods brought up, and she's a writer and journalist for those of you that don't know Lynn, but she brought up the point that we have such a rich history here. And we do, that the arts, it's a long history for the arts here, and that should be incorporated or interwoven into our narrative. Let's see. A lot of what we talked about was inclusion, and it was really important how we address people who are on the margins, either Indigenous or Black people, and how they fit in to this arts culture. Really important to make sure that people who maybe don't have access to jobs from the LGBTQ or BIPOC, we have jobs and we offer jobs, and we make that a focal point. We also discussed who our audience is and who are we trying to reach. And we need to define who our audience is. We also talked about the marginalized communities in Kingston and how they need to be represented, but also this gets back to the idea of a central calendar. There were events that were happening at the exact same time in Kingston, and this was quite a conflict for different groups because nobody knew that the other group was having a special event on that day. We talked about gentrification, of course, and I think Lynn brought this up again. It's a matter of scale, that big development is coming in, and as it comes in, we need to talk about scale because we are a small city. And as big developers come in, we want to make sure there's support for small businesses and for artists. You know, when big business, Lynn brought up, gets a tax break, where's the equity for the rest of the city? More nuance, new and old. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but percent for art, Lynn brought this up again, that taxes are already high. And in terms of our future, we need to think about taxes for arts, going for the arts. Also, the whole city is being rezoned. That's a big topic of conversation. And we have to figure out with our local officials how arts and culture fit into that. Recommendations. You know, we each had to speak about what's important to us from the things that we talked about today. And the thing that came up was collaboration. You know, how important it is for us to collaborate as a city with the other organizations that actually are the not-for-profits in our city. We also talked about gentrification and displacement. It's a burning issue, and we really have to focus. We have to be laser focused on how we are going to deal with the housing issue. We don't want to displace people who are under-resourced and are already living here. And we certainly don't want to displace the artists, the very people who are creating a vibrant culture around us. Accessibility, we really have to talk again about people in the margins and people who may be left out of this conversation. We have to, yes, and that's part of empowering, including the people and the very voices that are often left out. So we also have to have it, we have a need for dialogue with our elected officials. If they're not in this conversation, then, you know, we can talk and talk and talk till the cows come home and it won't mean anything. Collaboration came up, a very important part of this review. Gentrification, we talked about that, I've already covered that. artists, oh, Barbara Cohen brought up the idea that artists really need help with marketing and guidance. And that's was a strong point that we talked about for a while. We need to keep spaces accessible and affordable. Collaboration again, but we kept talking about this accessible space for artists. Let's see, beyond empowering and celebrating, we need a calendar. I mean, that's the end of that. The city website needs an arts calendar with all our arts resources and the promotion of the arts as well. We made the recommendation that the city needs to redo their website. And then last but not least, everyone in these conversations, and this is true, has a level of privilege and power. And I think that, you know, as we talk about having that power and privilege, how do we make sure that voices that are not heard or people on the margins are included in this? And, you know, my thing, when I think about what's really important, what we need to do, and certainly as a white person, I know I need to share. And it's about sharing and caring about the community you live in. You have to share what you have with those around you. So it was a great conversation all around.
Thank you so much, Anne. And thank you to everybody in our group.
So my group, oh.
Go for it. Go for it. No. Perfect. Seamless.
So my group is group number 2. I apologize to my group in that I did not select a reporter. So I'll do the reporting myself. And I like to talk too. So so it's interesting, Bailey and Eve, what you just summarized very well is so similar to what are the main points. It just made me smile all the way through. It's really spot on. And so I'll kind of summarize. In terms of is anything missing? We thought that there was a lot of emphasis on visual and performance arts, and that there could be more particular emphasis to the needs of literary arts, of folk arts, and of crafting. And that kind of, we heard feedback that there's maybe a little bit too much siloing happening in the arts community and in the response to what the arts needs, and that needs to be addressed. And that siloing not only includes meeting needs of only specific types of arts, but there's a lot of emphasis on, there's a lot of youth centering, where a lot of programs are about entrepreneurship and helping folks in education at the early stages, which is great. But there's a lot of professional artists out there that are really struggling and hurt, especially during times of COVID. And how can we help support those folks where most programs aren't oriented towards existing artists? We need more focus on underserved communities. Their gentrification and segregation are fundamental points of needing attention. The upcoming exhibit at SUNY New Paltz is going to be a huge asset that really should be leveraged here, and they should be a partner, and this can really be a driver of folks from around the region coming to experience this. In priority number 8, ensure affordable and accessible space for artists and creatives. The word welcoming, we think is an important aspect here too, that's a major barrier sometimes to certain spaces, and making sure that it's accessible and equitable for all. Percent for arts program is needed. So those are kind of our main missing aspects. And in terms of the priorities of what's the most important, and again, Bailey, this hits exactly what you've talked about as well, is what we found is really interesting is that everybody's priority kind of links back to number 1, which is greater collaboration and communication. So what we heard is, well, we need to strengthen government support and policy, and that really them as a partner and collaborator. We need to become a regional hub for arts and culture, so we're drawing more people in. And number 3, we really need to celebrate diversity and make sure that there's access of information and of partnership to all audiences, especially those that haven't had kind of equal seating at the table. But what we found is all these aspects really, first and foremost, are dependent on good collaboration and communication. And so the kind of takeaway from that, which is exactly what Bailey and Eve just talked about, is, well, what's a platform? Is we need a common channel, we need a calendar or some way to make sure that everybody has that common spot to be able to relay this information. And we had quite a bit of conversation about that. Should it be private? Should it be city? And what we folks talked about is the blanking on the existing channel.
Kingston Happening.
Thank you, Peter. The Kingston Happenings is a platform that many people already use and could be a good asset to build from. But a lot of folks voiced that, well, it's not necessarily that difficult to recreate, and do the folks behind Kingston Happenings even want to fill that charge? And should it be something like, if it was run by the city or the Arts Commission, would that be more equitable and have the resources behind it to really serve as that channel? So a number of folks thought that it should be managed by the City Department of Arts and Humanities. So when we talked about, well, who should be involved? Who should be, who are the players that should really kind of make this both in terms of this communication channel and anything else? And this is where I was pretty inspired, because our whole group, which I think we had the best workshop group, everybody volunteered themselves and said that they'd be willing to participate and that they would love to. And so everybody kind of put in their name and contact information of being a willing volunteer and participant in helping to build this, which was pretty inspiring. So I think that there's a lot of capacity here. And again, I was just so pleased to hear that our thoughts align so cleanly.
Can I just say something you left out was just the show in New Paltz is about Ben Wigfall. You mentioned the big show, but it's going to be in the spring of 22.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all, everybody. I love that. As John said, I do love that we are getting some consensus, and this is how, look, you all can do our jobs now, right? This is how we start to see what is really important to people, commonalities, and what is mentioned over and over and over again coming to the top. So having said that, and you will hear one thing that you've said a few times, I'm going to pull forward Chris, who is our fantastic reporter. No pressure, except John did just throw down the gauntlet. So about the best group, and I think ours is the best group. So Chris, I'm going to share my screen for you to report back. Chris, are you here?
Great. Oh, yes. Well, we had a great group too. Many of the things that have been brought up in the first two groups were, of course, brought up in this group as well. We had a long conversation about, a community calendar. The fact that Kingston Happenings is trying to supply that, that Arts Mid-Hudson has one as well. Often you have to enter the information yourself. And I think that probably stops it from really happening. There was the notion that it's really a paid position because it is gathering together such a diverse amount of information on a regular basis, so people are in the loop. But it was emphasized that has been a big missing element for a long time. And even now, we didn't talk about this, but the whole concept of newspapers is, print is basically disappearing. And since COVID, it's gotten even worse, I think. And so where people generally use the media to get their information out, it's limited. And now, everybody turns to social media for everything. Another big subject was transportation as a way to link uptown, downtown, midtown on a regular basis, and where would the funding come from for something like that. It was also mentioned the notion of social gatherings. Where can artists get together in a more casual environment on a more regular basis? Arts Mid-Hudson does something like that at the Beverly on a monthly basis. But could there be more? there was the hope for more space. It's kind of what Anne was talking about in terms of an art center. Tech City, which isn't in Kingston, but is quite near Kingston, is in the midst of being reimagined by Ulster County. And I think it's got a long way to go. There's millions that have to be invested in that facility just to, protect it from the cold and the hot. And it hasn't really been utilized for 25 years. So there's a lot that could be done, but it's gigantic and could actually serve a lot of different purposes. And then where do artists find affordable space? And because affordable means something different to every person. So that was a big topic as well. What else here? Paid position organized. Old Dutch, Old Dutch Church it was offered actually as a possible artist rehearsal and or workspace. So that was kind of cool. They have the sanctuary, but they also have a very large other room, second room. I don't know, Joy, did I cover everything? I think everything in Kingston is racially separated.
I'm
I
sorry.
want to see that go away. Yeah, well, the racial separation is major in this city, in most cities in this country, and it's it's got to be dealt with head on and every way possible, and it ain't easy. I mentioned that I was working with restorative justice before COVID hit to try to get some of those young people involved in what we do as an outlet, as a way to learn a trade. To hopefully keep them from falling back into the justice system. So, and I think that there's probably a lot of groups that all of us could engage with that might help make those baby steps towards another way to live. I think that's about it.
That is, you did a great job, Chris. And as you can see, you're hearing some of the same things over and over again, which is good, right? This is what we're talking about when we say, these are priorities for people, and this is what we are looking to see what people will support. Okay, we're going to move to group number 4. Whose group was group number 4?
I am group number 4, and we are represented by the lovely Susan.
Hello, everybody. I will be brief because a lot of what everybody else has covered, we discussed too. I think one of the probably the most important thing that nobody else talked about was in those topics, there was nothing there about education and the arts. And I do believe that, if we're going to continue in this move forward, that we have to have some kind of arts and education programs in the schools. And I know that Laura's doing wonderful things with Draw, but I think that it's really important that we have a collaboration, cooperation, and communication with the schools. We talked about technology and also with COVID and how just how to navigate through that. How's it gonna be in the future? How do we do it now? There was talk about also resources that kind of along that same vein of the calendar and the communication, is that if there were under one kind of like an arts council maybe, or this hub, that there would be resources if you need help grant writing, if you need help with marketing, if you need help with those kinds of things, that there would be one place that you could go for that. So that's, and then of course, all of the other things that everybody else has talked about. But I think those are the 3 things that we did talk about that were not, that did not come up in the other conversations. So I think that's it. If you think of anything else, Tiffany?
You did great, Susan. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Valerie Guevara, who will give us a little insight from the conversation of the Spanish room.
Hi, everyone. We had a short but very fruitful conversation because of time constraints, but the main points that were raised, while they do think they incorporate spaces for people that speak Spanish, they should also think of other communities who are often left off the table to have these spaces where they feel included. A thing that they mentioned is sometimes things get lost in translation. So it's really important to not just literally translate what you have on your PowerPoint, but make sure that it is being catered accordingly to whatever culture you're referring to. Not all communities are on the same level. They don't all understand the same things. Depending on their background, they have a different meaning for culture. And it shouldn't be like a one-dimensional presentation. It should be a little bit more relevant to who you're speaking with. And then the last point they made was, for example, the Guatemalan community of the Quechua, who is a large community in Kingston. They don't necessarily have a written language. So how can we be more accessible to types of groups like this? And how can we be more, how can we include them more in the conversations? An example they gave is, for example, they do a lot of hands and crafts. And a lot of times these same hands and crafts that you have locally are sold for more money, and people will flock all over to Woodstock to buy these types of products. And that was it.
Excellent. Thank you, Valerie. And thank you everyone for participating and for really sharing, for spending your time with us, but really sharing from your heart, based on your constituencies, your knowledge, your understanding of Kingston and what you want to see in Kingston be successful. I'm actually going to turn this over to Eve so that she can give us the next steps of where we're going with this information.
Thank you, Joy, and thanks again to all of you. What a rich discussion. So this is the key next step. We're going to give the overall next steps in a minute, but we want all of you to take the SurveyMonkey poll. Tiffany is putting the link in the chat, and it will also be on the Engage Kingston website. And this is really your chance to choose, of those 8, the top 5. And that will then feed into the next steps. Please, next slide. So what's next? We have 2 minutes left, and we're just so grateful for all your time. So we're going to wrap it up here. Obviously, this is a very rich discussion. We want you to now vote on the priorities via SurveyMonkey. We did it via SurveyMonkey to make sure people who could not be here today can vote, and they will be able to access this presentation also on the Kingston, Engage Kingston website. We're then going to be creating priority task forces. One of the reasons we asked if you wanted to be involved. And that's going to lead into action planning, which in turn will feed into the draft culture plan, which will then be presenting to the public. And that's really the rest of the process. It's really taking all this data into those opportunities, hearing which of the ones are most important to you, and then really getting into the specifics of how to implement those with action plans with you, the community. And please follow Engage Kingston for updates. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Addie.
All right. Thank you all so much. I just also want to reiterate, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and opinions. This is the way that we are able to make a really great plan. So I want to thank you for all your time and energy. I also want to encourage you to head over to Engage Kingston if you haven't already registered. It is the landing page for all things related to the Arts and Culture Master Plan. So please be sure to head on over there so that you can learn more about the project. If you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, anything, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is on the city website, but I'll go ahead and pop it in the chat. But thank you all so much. We really appreciate you coming out and taking the time to help us make a great plan.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you again for participating.
Thank you. This was great. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're gonna have a quick debrief, but I feel like there's a couple.
Yeah,